Welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. So I kind of realized that I should probably explain myself a little more often on why I like CGC 9.8 comic books so much. And I have sort of touched on it in past videos, but it is kind of a bit impractical, like every video, to sort of explain all the reasonings and things like that. So yeah, good of a time as ever to sort of make a full video on why I like specifically CGC 9.8 comic books so much. So yeah, I kind of broke it down here into about 5 reasons and got a couple other talking points too at the end we'll talk about. But for the first reason, when I got back into comic book collecting, I really kind of targeted sort of 1980s and 1990s comic books as the books I wanted to collect, because I really like to buy those nostalgic books that I loved when I was a kid. So those books, they're not very rare. They're very heavily printed back then. Like, comic book collecting was one of the coolest things you could do as a kid in the 80s and early 90s. So they're not very rare. So from that perspective, it kind of makes sense just, if you're coming at it like me from a bit of an investment perspective too. I'm not saying that I purely buy comic books for purely because investment, but having that investment perspective, I think when you're buying 80s and 90s books, probably the best thing to do is to stick to CGC 9.8 because they're not very rare. So you just want to get sort of the rarest version you can of them, and that's in most cases is the CGC 9.8. And certainly there's 9.9s and 10s, but just kind of being realistic, the 9.8 is kind of the most rare book you can get. So buying all these nostalgic books I really wanted, kind of made sense to get the 9.8s because I wanted a more rare investment kind of thing. So that's the first reason, kind of an era-specific reason. The second reason is the pride of ownership from having a perfect CGC 9.8 comic book that you were nostalgic about when you were a kid is a great thing. And, obviously CGC 9.6s and the 9.8s, there's not much of a difference, so a 9.6 is pretty much perfect too. But, so maybe you get that same pride of ownership. But with the 9.8s, you definitely know you're getting an almost perfect comic book. So just that pride of ownership is just great. And there's a bit of a subjective reason here, but I think having a perfect copy of, again, a book that you were nostalgic about when you were a kid is a great feeling. So that's the second reason. Third reason, as a collector, I really like with the CGC 9.8 comic books, you get like a 1 of 350 or 1 of 450, or sometimes there's over 1,000 of whatever issues. So, but you'd get that, specific 1 of collector item because, realistically there's not very many others that are 9.9s or 10s. So it's kind of like the highest graded book you can expect. And so I really like that feeling being a collector, to have that sort of rare collector item that's the highest graded, most near mint book you can buy, and that sort of 1 of, again, 200, 1 of 300. Sort of reminds me of like some of these Funko Pops that are quite popular to collect. And sometimes they're like limited manufactured to like 1 of 500 or 1 of 200 and things like that. So it's really similar to that, except with these books, you get the intrinsic value of the first appearance ever of some of these amazing characters that are going to be ingrained in our culture. You get the first appearance in pop culture, which was print media at this time, and kind of still is, but that might change over time. But I think these books are going to be timeless. And whereas the Funko Pops, they're just, some corporation decided to only make 250 of some weird looking one. So pretty much I'm not into Funko Pops, but with these, there's way more intrinsic value behind the stories and the first appearances in these books, and the amazing art and the amazing covers, obviously, too. So, but to get that 1 of a limited number, great collector item in a perfect comic from this era is pretty great. So that's the third reason. Yeah, fourth reason, for me, a personal reason, it's just worth it for me. It matches my budget to get the 9.8s from this era, because how I sort of came at it, I'm mentioning sort of an investment perspective. Like, I sort of had a bit of a stack of cash that I earmarked to buy CGC 9.8 comic books. So, for me, it just made sense to kind of, buy a CGC 9.8 for $500 instead of, say, buying 2 9.4s and a 9.6 for $400. And so, technically you save $100 if you buy the other, but you don't get a 9.8. Maybe you get a little more variety and pride of ownership. But because I have that investment perspective, I think it's going to be better to go more rare. And again, because I've sort of earmarked the pile of cash, it's not like I'm caring that I'm trying to save $100 here and there or something like that. Like it's more of I just want the best, most rare investment kind of thing. Obviously mixing in, loving the books and that nostalgic connection too. So, but it just, the fourth reason is it just matches my budget to get the 9.8s rather than saving a little bit of money and getting the 9.6s, which for other people is probably a great thing to do. Like if you're not like me and you haven't saved up for the last 15 years, like that's something I've done, so I'm in a position to kind of come at it from this perspective. So a bit of a personal reason for number 4. Number 5 is I love it. It completely satisfies my OCD. Like I got a little bit of OCD about certain things, and to have a couple boxes just of all 9.8s, and they're all 9.8s, no 9.6s or 9.4s in there, just really satisfies my OCD. So that is the last 5th reason there. So I want to talk about though, kind of what's not a reason why I, like CGC 9.8 comic books, because I think some people might think this could be a reason. Like I'm not wildly bullish or anything on CGC 9.8 comic books. Like some people, you talk to some collectors and they're like, oh, over time, like the 9.8s, the price range is just going to get ridiculous, and 9.8s are going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 times more than a 9.6. Like I don't agree with that view, actually. Like I think what'll happen is there'll always be that sort of price range that there is now, but certain issues, if they do good, the 9.8 is going to do good, the 9.6 is going to do good, the 9.4 is going to do good. So yeah, I don't really buy that argument that over time the 9.8s are just going to skyrocket compared to the 9.6s, like just because they're 9.8s. So that's not a reason why. It's definitely more of all the other reasons, and not that specifically I think CGC 9.8s are way better than CGC 9.6s. Like, it's all issue specific. Like, if a character really heats up or catches pop culture off guard somehow and somehow comes into, gets a lot of promotion somehow, that book's going to do good, whether it's a 9.8 or a 9 or an 8.5 or, whatever it might be. So I think I'm not really specifically like bullish on 9.8s at all. And yeah, so that's kind of the one thing that I wanted to highlight that wasn't a reason. Yeah, because I think some people might think I'm just trying to pump 9.8s or something like that, but certainly, yeah, I'm not really against. I don't really think again that the 9.8s are going to do better than 9.6s, and even I know some people on the team have pointed out in the past that sometimes, in percentage-wise, it might be better to get a 9.4 or 9.6 because percentage-wise they end up going up more when an issue gets hot. Whereas, the 9.8s are a lot more expensive, so percentage-wise, if they double, then that's a huge jump in price. So, whereas in 9.4s and 9.6s, I think there's been pretty good work done by some blogs and things like that. So, and when you think about it from that, if 9.8s don't match your budget, maybe 9.4s and 9.6s are better if you are on a limited budget, because, yeah, they do just as good. If a book gets hot, they're going to do just as good. So, yeah, that's not really a reason to, want to buy a 9.8. It's more about all those other, OCD reasons and the collector item reasoning and everything like that. So, yeah, the last thing, too, and just kind of concluding up, I read I read the Overstreet price guides every year, and before the price guide, there are some blurbs by all the Overstreet advisors that they do kind of their yearly wrap-up of what they kind of think of how the comic book market went that year. And there's quite a few positive arguments from CGC collectors that, 80s and 90s and modern books, you just want to buy CGC 9.8 pretty much, because, a lot of times it's just it's worth it. Like, it's still within a budget for the most part, and they make some of those arguments that over time, I bet CGC 9.8s will just gradually, march away in price from 9.6s, and I'm not sure if that's the case, but I just think, as the whole tide rises, as I think, superheroes are ingrained in our culture for sure, and I know there's some people that kind of talk about maybe there being like a superhero bubble, and that, that's interesting, and it could be true, but I really think that these characters are ingrained in our culture. And in 1988 or 1989, it was that Batman movie came out. That was the first movie, and in 2021, a new Batman movie's coming out, and everyone's pumped up about it. And I think in 2080, there's going to be another Batman movie that people are really pumped up about. And so, yeah, heroes are just timeless stories. And so, reading some of these Overstreet price guide and advisors and some of their blurbs for if you're if you're serious about collecting and you have the budget, 1980s to modern books, just kind of makes sense to get the CGC 9.8s because the rest is what we all talk about on the channel, being really patient and not rushing out there and paying up for CGs, because certainly there's always buy it nows on eBay that are absurdly overpriced for every key issue out there. So. And that's all the other videos that we like to do. But, yeah, so definitely worth a video to just specifically talk about why I like CGC 9.8 so much. Because, I've really enjoyed the pride of ownership of kind of sticking to CGC 9.8s. And, yeah, really those Overstreet price guides, I think, was the original inspiration probably. Because when you hear those advisors, you can tell they got a lot of experience selling comic books. And, yep, a lot of them mention that, hey, for these modern books, CGC 9.8s, if you're serious about it, you probably just want to go after those. And, it's probably, in general, a lot better to kind of save up an extra month or two and go after CGC 9.8s rather than pick away every month at, 9.2s and 9.4s. For 80s and 80s to modern as well. That's another thing. This is all sort of assuming 80s to modern books. Before, 1980s, it's kind of a different ballgame because, more rare, and they're not in good, people didn't put their comic books in bagging boards back then, so a little bit of a different ballgame. But for my generation, CGC 9.8s, I think if you're, you got the budget and you're serious about kind of coming at it from an investment perspective, it does make sense to, save up a little bit more, go after the 9.8s. Alright, that'll be it for this video here. Thanks so much for watching. I would invite you to join the team and subscribe to Team CGC 9.8. Hit the bell to get all the latest notifications. Add me on Instagram and Twitter too. I'll have all the links in the description below for that. But again, I think I don't touch on this enough, I think, and we just end up doing video after video of lists and stuff, and I think it can get lost in translation a bit of why I just stick to CGC 9.8 so much. So yeah, worth the full video here. Thanks so much for watching today. I'll see you on the next one.